Today, we're jumping right into one of the most interesting and, honestly, most controversial methods in language teaching, Suggestopedia. So here's a quick look at what we're going to cover. We'll start with what it is, get into its core features, the psychology behind it, what the classroom is like, and then, of course, get into the big debate about whether it actually works. All right, so first things first, what in the world is Suggestopedia? Well, it all started with a Bulgarian psychiatrist named Georgy Lazanov, who had this pretty radical idea about the human brain and how we learn. At its very core, Suggestopedia is built on one big idea. We can all learn things way, way faster than we think. The only thing holding us back, according to Lazanov, are all these mental blocks we have. You know, the fear of making mistakes, or the voice in our head that says this is too hard. The whole point of the method is to de-suggest those negative ideas. See, Lazanov was convinced that most of us are only using about 5, maybe 10% of our actual mental capacity. So the entire goal here is to find a way to tap into that other 90%, to unlock a kind of super learning ability he believed we all have just waiting to be used. So what does a Suggestopedia lesson actually look and feel like? Let me tell you. It's a completely different world from your average classroom. It really boils down to 3 key things: music, comfort, and a very specific kind of teacher authority. Yeah, the priorities here are totally flipped. The classroom vibe, the music playing, and how the teacher acts are just as important as the stuff you're trying to learn. The main goal is to get students so relaxed that their emotional defenses come down. Linguists sometimes call this the affective filter. It's like a mental wall that goes up when we're stressed, and it stops us from taking in new information. Okay, so let's dig into the psychology that's supposed to make all this work. It's not just about creating a nice, cozy room. There's a real theory behind why it's set up this way. So learning is happening on a few different levels here. First, the teacher has to be a total authority figure, someone who inspires absolute confidence. Second, students are kind of encouraged to adopt a childlike, super receptive state of mind, almost like how a kid trusts a parent. And third is this idea of double-planedness, which just means you're learning from 2 things at once: the actual lesson and all the indirect stuff, like the music or even the posters on the wall. And speaking of the environment, this is where it gets really unique. The physical space in Suggestopedia is meticulously designed to put you in a state of relaxed, open-minded learning. I mean, forget hard plastic chairs and desks in rows. A Suggestopedia classroom is supposed to look more like a comfy living room. You've got soft, reclining armchairs, bright and cheerful decor. Everything is designed to make you relax. And the music is super specific, too. It's usually slow Baroque music, the kind that has a tempo of about 60 beats per minute, which is pretty close to a resting heart rate. And yeah, this is the exact kind of rigid, stressful environment that Suggestopedia was created to fight against. The core belief was that there's just no way you can tap into your brain's full potential if you're stuck in a setting like this one. So what actually happens during a lesson? Well, the whole thing is built around this very unique 3-part cycle, and the most famous part is something called the concert session. First, the teacher presents the new material, and they often do it in a really theatrical, dramatic way. Then comes the main event, the concert session. And finally, there's the activation part, where students get to actually use the new language in a fun, low-pressure way with things like games and songs. Now, that concert session is actually split into 2 parts. First is the active concert. The students have their books open and they follow along as the teacher reads the text, really dramatically, matching their voice to the rhythm of the music. Then comes the passive concert. Books down, eyes closed, and you just relax and listen as the teacher reads the text again, but this time over that slow Baroque music. This is the moment when Lazanov believed the information just slips past your conscious brain and gets absorbed by your subconscious, almost effortlessly. Okay, so with all these pretty unusual techniques, comfy chairs, classical music, dramatic readings, does any of it actually work? Well, this is where the story gets really complicated and the big debate kicks off. I mean, the promises from people who supported this method were huge. We're not talking about learning a little bit faster. They claimed students could learn a language up to 25 times faster than normal and become conversational with almost 0 stress. It sounded like a miracle. But the academic community was not buying it, not at all. The reaction from a lot of linguists was incredibly skeptical, and some were pretty harsh, like the critic T. Scoville, who famously called the whole theory, well, you can see it right there.
The critics pointed to some really big problems. For one, there was no solid scientific proof to back up these wild claims. Lozanov's own data was questioned pretty heavily. Plus, let's be honest, setting up classrooms with reclining armchairs is just not practical for most schools. And some argued that if you strip away all the music and comfort, it's really just rote memorization, and that any success was probably just a powerful placebo effect. It worked because students believed it would work.
And that really leaves us with a fascinating final question, doesn't it? Was Lozanov really onto some secret about how our brains learn? Or did he just create a brilliant system that proves how powerful our own beliefs and expectations can be? It's a question that really gets to the heart of how our minds, our feelings, and our environment all work together when we try to learn something new.